Hello, my name is Adam. Welcome to the channel. I like to review books and podcasts and movies and TV shows. I said podcast, but I don't think I've actually reviewed a podcast yet, but I definitely will. Welcome to True Crime Tuesday, hard to say as well, where I actually review something on a Tuesday connected to true crime, a genre that I think that we all like for various reasons. I don't know why. That's an interesting one to talk about, but that's not the subject of today's review. Today's review is about a book called The Texas Tower Sniper: The Terrifying True Story of Charles Whitman by Ryan Green. And so Brian Greene does this unique thing in true crime where he actually goes into the mind of the criminal he's writing a book about. This is, I think, the fourth book of his that I've read. And at times it really works, and at times it doesn't work very well. I think that it really works in this book up until the end. So Charles Whitmer, if you don't know, he is probably one of the most famous mass murderers. Not when I say mass murderer, maybe spree murderer is a better term for that. So mass murderer, you think Charlie Manson, even though Manson didn't directly kill anybody, or Ted Bundy or somebody like that. Not a serial killer because he didn't do it over time. A spree murderer because he did it at once. And uh, he did it in the summer of 1966 at the University of Texas. He went up to the tower there in Austin, and he just started shooting people. Before that, he murdered his mom and he murdered his wife. And so Green does a good job of kind of delving into his psyche, like what were his motivations. And he paints this picture of this guy who was just crumbling under all of this stress. Like his father would put him under so much stress to succeed academically, to succeed as like a hunter, to succeed in the military, and well, I mean, succeed academically. And he kind of rebels against his father. He goes into the Marines and he feels freedom for the first time. He gets in trouble and he gets kicked out of the Marines for, well, he gambles and then he loans people money, and the guy didn't give him money back, so he threatened him with a gun. And that didn't go very well. So that guy who Charles Whitmer threatened went to the authorities, and so there was a court martial, and he was put in military prison for a while, and then he got out after he served his time. And then he tried to go back to school, and his father was paying for it, but he didn't feel like he wanted to be in his father's debt. So slowly he's like cracking. And Green writes this very good scene early in the book where Charles is a teenager and he's starting to sort of rebel against his father's rule. And he comes back late one night, and he's been drinking, and his father is waiting for him, and his father like beats him and beats him and beats him and beats him, and eventually Charles falls into the pool, and his father just goes inside, and Charles could have drowned because he was unconscious, but he wakes up in the pool and drags himself out and goes back in the house, and then he decides, yeah, I can't do this anymore, and he runs off to join the army. So he paints this picture of this guy being under so much stress and feelings of inadequacy, and he eventually like his one thing was that he was better than his father because his father was beating his mom, and he rescues his mom from that situation. And because of all the stress he's under, and he is drowning in debt basically, and he owes a lot of money to his father, not just because of that, because of his upbringing as well. He beats his own wife, and then this little thing, this little thread of humanity is gone. And he says, "Oh, I am like my father. I should have shot him." And then, and then, weirdly, he gets this. He starts writing a lot about many, many things, and his friends can clearly see that he's not well. But he goes to the psychologist, and he thinks that the psychologist is wrong, and the psychologist just basically thinks that he has unresolved issues with his dad, which is probably true. And he gets this idea that the solution would be for him to kill himself, but he doesn't want to leave his wife alone because she would be too sad, and he doesn't want to leave his mom alone because he's afraid she'll go back to his dad. So obviously the solution is to murder both of them and then go up on a tower and just start shooting people. Obviously, because like what else are you gonna do? That was sarcasm, by the way, if that wasn't obvious. Um, yeah. So why I don't like so that's kind of like the factual information, or at least as much as Ryan Green was able to reconstruct using the writings that Charles Whitmer left. Um, but at the end is where, so he's gone through this journey of like really describing the emotional state that Charles is in, and you can kind of believe that he would take such drastic steps. They're not rational, but by the end of the book, he's not behaving in a rational way at all. And the conclusion, so um, Green mentions that there's an autopsy, and in the autopsy, they find a tumor in Whitmer's brain, and the tumor was affecting the amygdala. And the amygdala is the center of your brain, the part of your brain which is responsible for impulse control. And he wasn't able to control his impulses. So, um, what he did was kind of a reflection of that. And Green argues, like, well, he planned everything. He planned this, so he was able to control his impulses. And I think that is not exactly true. Because just because he had a good plan, because that was his entire personality, is to plan things and to, you know, do all of those, be a Marine and be a son to this kind of tyrant. So his whole life was about planning. And so the impulse control, I think, was his decision to murder his wife, murder his mom, and murder all those people. That's where the impulse control went off. And I think the tumor probably wasn't the only reason that that happened, but his psychological torture from his father also contributed to that. Also contributing to it, where it was his feeling that he failed in life and his very skewed worldview that had been created by all of the events before. And the reason I think that it's more than just, oh, it's a personal choice of his, is because he, as I said, he had this graphomania and he would like write things, which is a sign of some kind of mental disorder, apparently, according to Green. But I think also some of the things that he would write is that he had self improvement plans and he was trying to be better. And he would write something like, smile more, people will trust you, or like, you know, don't don't complain about things. And you know, if he lived now, he would have a bunch of self-help books about positive thinking or whatever. So I don't think that his intention ever was to become the person that he became. And the Green concludes that he was lying and that he lied a lot. Like, people believed that he was an honors student, even though he wasn't. And then when he was confronted with the the fact that he had been lying about that, he decided that the only course was to go up into this tower and start shooting people. So I'm not really sympathetic to Whitmer. I don't get me don't confuse it. I don't want people to think that I think oh, poor guy went up in a tower and shot at 66 people and killed at least 13 of them. I don't think that is, I think it's a tragedy what happened. And my conclusion is I don't know why he did it, but I would strongly suspect that there was some kind of mental illness or disordered thinking, because rationally, if he wanted to just end his suffering, he was a pretty good shot. He could just have shot himself, you know. And if he was the kind of person who wanted the spotlight, I think that there would have been signs before that. Um, yeah. And I talked a little bit in another review because I read this book and then I remembered that there is a documentary movie, very strange, but done in a really weird way because it's animated, but it's done in a good way. Weird but good. So called Tower. So I watched that again, and it's really interesting how Tower talks about the perspective of the victims, and Green is giving you the perspective of the killer. And I think on the one hand, it's beneficial to understand the killer's thoughts and motivations, but on the other hand, it's completely irrelevant, because what's important in a situation like that is the victims and what happened to them and how you help them. Yeah, so I think weirdly, people kind of, not all people, but people kind of idolized Whitmer for his skill at killing those people because he was a really good shot. And then that kind of fed into other mass killings like Columbine, uh, a lot of them. Um, so it kind of fed into that, but people who were there didn't talk about what happened to them with each other. So I think if there's any lesson to be learned in a horrible tragedy like that, is that it is better to talk about it than not talk about it. You know, sometimes if you have problems, it's not always good to talk about your problems because then you're just creating and thinking about your problems. But I think in a case like that, you don't need to obsess about it, but you need to talk about it because it's a huge thing that happened to you. And one of the victims in that documentary, he talks about the fact that usually when bad things happen to you, they happen to you in private, or at least in the privacy of your own life. But this is a bad thing that happened in public to them. So, but they tried to keep it private. Yeah, so I don't know what I would rate this book. I I I I like the way that it was written. I think that it's useful, but on the other hand, I think that the conclusions were a bit stretched. So maybe 6 out of 10. All right. If you read the book or you have thoughts about what Whitmer did, please leave your comments in the comment section. Like and subscribe. Bye bye.